You are listening to the Music Mondays with Mazement podcast. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. For more information, go to musicmondayspodcast.com. In this episode, I'm going to let you know a few things that stuck out to me in the latest news. I'm going to introduce another friend of mine in the Music Mondays Hangout segment, and I'm going to close out today's episode with a few releases that stuck out to me recently. Here it is.
I'm so ratchet rich. Every day, all day, ratchet rich. Gotta be ratchet rich. Ratchet rich. Ratchet rich. Ratchet rich. Ratchet rich. That's right.
What's up, music heads? We are here for another episode of the Music Mondays with Mazement podcast. I'm your host,
Mazement.
Before we get into anything, here's a fact.
Music Mondays, music facts.
The DMC World Championship is an annual DJ competition hosted by the Disco Mix Club, which began in 1985.
Music Mondays, music facts.
Lupe Fiasco and Royce da 5'9" went back and forth a little bit on Instagram. This month marked the 4-year anniversary since Royce's 11th mixtape called The Bar Exam 4. The first track on that mixtape was called C. Dolores, which attacked Lupe Fiasco for his 2015 track called Mural. Lupe then came back at Royce, and it was a friendly little exchange. I mean, I wouldn't buy too much into it. They do a podcast together called The Lupe Royce Show, so check that out as well if you're fans. But this was more probably just a celebration of the 4-year anniversary and just to bring it back and, you know, get some rapping out of it. Jay-Z posted a Reasonable Doubt 25-year anniversary NFT. So if you don't know what an NFT is, it's a non-fungible token. For more info, you'll have to look it up because there's so many things about it that you'll have to read up on. But this one in particular was a digital art like most others. A portion of the proceeds from the sale will benefit the Sean Carter Foundation. And that's an organization that provides scholarships to low-income students. And the bidding will start at $1,000. I know that, but who knows what it's going to go for. Concerts are back. Not sure if you noticed paying attention online. I had a friend last week that posted like 2 feet away from Dave Grohl performing with the Foo Fighters. So it looked like concerts are back in full swing. I'm not 100% sure on like festivals and all that, but I'm pretty sure they'll be back up pretty soon. I think we're still going to see a lot of virtual stuff kicking in here and there, since a lot of that became pretty trendy during the pandemic. But speaking of which, I checked out another documentary on Netflix called This Is Pop. I watched 2 episodes. The first one I watched was based on the auto-tune, which is a very controversial subject. I mean, the majority of the people I know don't like auto-tune. I mean, I have mixed feelings about it, but it shed light on its origin and who created it. It wasn't T-Pain. He's actually a big part of it, you know, big part of the episode, you know, and he talks about a little bit of the controversy he had to deal with throughout the process, but it's worth a shot. You got to check it out. You'll see that you'll be introduced to the creator of auto-tune and learn how he came up with it. It's very interesting. The second episode I watched was about how country music turned to pop, which was interesting to me because I'm not a huge country fan at all. If you listen to this podcast, you know that. And that's one of the reasons, you know, the whole poppy part of country. I feel like old school country was a lot better. Not that I jammed out to it, but that's just my theory. Aside from everything going on around the industry, last episode, if you listened in, you learned about my new group called Real East Duo. So expect more news on that in the coming month. For more information on that, stay tuned to facebook.com/Real East Duo, or you could follow Rise Up Entertainment, the record label as well. So that's riseupent.net or Facebook/RiseUpENT. It's been a while since I've done a hangout segment on this podcast. It was like one of the first segments that I introduced to this podcast, but the first 2 were actually Lee Evans from Jambox Studios in Manhattan, and then Ronnie Reed, who's a comedian friend of mine. You know, so it's always these friends of mine that I bring on, and we just kind of catch up, see what they have going on, and talk a little bit about their story. And today, as you know from the title of this episode, it's DJ Rob Swift. DJ Rob Swift was a huge influence of mine starting out. I mean, when he was with the Executioners doing songs with like Linkin Park and others, like they were like a mainstream DJ group back then. That was back during a time when like I was going to DJ Academy at Scratch, and DJing wasn't really a thing. Like for that little period there, like it was shocking if you saw like a female DJ in there. I remember I had like one in my class and it was like so cool. Now like obviously a lot of women DJs are out there and it's awesome to see, but it wasn't such a diverse and popular thing back then. It was just so like subjective, I think. But now we all know what DJing has become. And I feel like these turntablists and these pioneers to DJing get overshadowed, especially DJs like Rob Swift, who's one of the best turntablists in the world today. Him and I go back for a little over a decade now, and I can't wait to catch up with him and see what he's got going on. And more importantly, for you to hear what he has going on, because I guarantee you're going to learn a thing or two that you haven't heard before. We're going to get into that, and then we're going to close out this episode with a little release feast. I just want to bring up a few releases that caught my attention. Here it is, a new Music Mondays Hangout segment. Yeah, man. So how's it going?
It's going good, bro. It's going really good.
How about them Jets?
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, let's see what happens this season, dude. They just keep letting the fans down, but I'm loyal, so I'm going to stick with them.
Dude, it's so tough to not look at like a new regime and be like, oh, this is it, but it's
yeah,
like,
right. Yeah.
It's happened so many times. Right. Yeah. No, that's sick. Are you booked for any games this year to spin or no?
No, I haven't done that gig in a minute. It's been like, I want to say 3 to 4 years since I've done that Jets gig.
Oh, okay.
So right now it's just about me pushing this Brolic Army DJ school, man. That's like my main focus right now.
Hell yeah. And I can't wait to get into that with you.
Yeah.
Now to give some listeners like a background, some of you might be listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but you could also view this episode on YouTube with DJ Rob Swift here. Now, to give some background on your history, obviously you were influenced by your brother and your father, and that's why you became a DJ when you were younger, correct?
Yes. My father immigrated here to New York City from Colombia, South America in the late 60s, got himself settled, then sent for my mom and my older brother. They got here in the early 70s, and my dad worked in a factory, man. And if you look at my dad's hands, you'll see that this guy busts his ass to make a way for myself, my mom, and my brother. And his nails all puffed up and like his hands all rough. Yeah, man.
Damn.
Blue collar worker. And to make extra money, he would DJ. It's funny when I think about it, because it's not like my dad was into hip hop or even knew hip hop was evolving in the mid 70s. He just spun his salsa, his merengue, his cumbia, his Latin music from Colombia. But his first son, my older brother, was immersed in hip hop at the time. He would go to the park jams. He'd connect with friends here in Corona, Queens that had records. And on days off from school, and my parents obviously had to work, my brother would invite his friends over to our house, and then they would use my dad's equipment and they would cut it up. My brother would scratch up Big Beat by Billy Squier or like Walk This Way from Aerosmith. His friends would rap because my dad had everything you needed: microphones, turntables, mixers, tape decks. So they would make these mixtapes throughout the afternoon, and I would just sit there and watch. And then like 4:30, my brother would pack everything up exactly the way my dad left it, because if he found out, that was my brother's ass. So after a few years of just spectating, at 12 years old, I asked my brother to teach me, and here I am today.
So half the problem is, learning how to DJ, but on the other half, you had to be like a ninja and put it back the right way.
Yeah. Yo, my dad he knew my brother was mischievous. So what my dad would do, which was funny now when I think about it, is my mom, and I talk about this in the movie Scratch. My mom had these makeup cases with a lock, and my dad would take the needles and hide them in my mom's makeup case and lock them. But my brother, being who he is to this day, he would take my mom's hairpins and pick the lock and then take the needles out and use them and then put the needles back in the makeup case, and my dad would not know.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And like as you learned and everything, who became like your biggest influence, growing up and everything, even to this day, somebody that you look back on, you're like, wow, I'm still, looking up to that person. If it wasn't your brother and your father.
Well, off the top, my brother and my father were my biggest influences in the early days of me embracing this art form, because my father was my first example of what a DJ does in a room full of people. My dad would get hired to DJ at weddings, New Year's Eve parties, churches, and he would take my brother and I, because we would help him lug all the equipment. And then I would sit there and watch him control people. And
Right.
that to me was just like, wow, like my dad has this power, to play music and get people to move and dance. My brother was my first example of what the four elements of hip hop are. You have obviously DJing, but my brother my brother used to break dance. He used to write graffiti. He rhymed. He did all the elements. So he introduced me to it all. And I feel like if it wasn't for my brother, I definitely wouldn't be here today. I don't think I'd be as passionate about hip hop as I am now if it wasn't for those early days of him schooling me on what was what. Aside from my brother and dad, a lot of my influences were on the radio. I used to listen to Chuck Chill Out on 98.7 Kiss, Red Alert. Then I would move the dial over to WBLS and listen to Mr. Magic and Marley Marl. And then they would play music that featured other DJs scratching. You know what I'm saying? So those guys, the radio DJs from back then, Johnny Juice as well, he had a college radio show. Those guys just schooled me without them really even knowing who I was or that I even existed. I was getting schooled on DJing 101 by listening to them rock on the radio. I would go out and search the records that they would play. I would get a cassette tape and record the shows on Friday night, Saturday night. Then Sunday, I'd go out, buy the records. And for that whole week, I would recreate the shows that I recorded on cassette tape. That was how I taught myself the different skills that those guys were doing, because my brother knew but so much. And Chuck Chill Out, Red Alert, Marley Marl, they were more experienced than my brother. So I would copy what they were doing. And gradually, each time I reached the plateau, then I would seek other sources of inspiration. I would watch the DJ battles featuring Cash Money, Aladdin, Cutmaster Swift, and copy from those guys. And then eventually, man, I would say my biggest influence was meeting Dr. Butcher in 1990 through a mutual friend named Juju from the Beatnuts. And that experience changed the entire trajectory of my DJing, because up until meeting Dr. Butcher, my mentality was, so long as I could do what Chuck Chill Out does, Red Alert, Marley Marl, Cash Money, Aladdin, Johnny Juice, Cutmaster Swift, so long as I could do what those guys did on the radio or in that video, I'm dope. I know I'm dope because I could do everything that those masters are doing. But when I met Dr. Butcher, I went to his house thinking, I'm going to impress this guy because he's going to see that I could do what all the dope DJs are doing now. And I remember I got on the set, started cutting it up. So I did my favorite Aladdin rendition, my favorite Steve D rendition. And then he got on and was original. He wasn't copying anyone. He was doing his shit. None of those DJs that I looked up to was doing, but on the same level. So, in other words, not only was he original, he was being creative. And I was just like, what? Like, how is this possible? Like, I thought there was a cap to what you could do as a DJ. I thought that what Steve D was the ceiling of what you could do as a DJ. What Aladdin, Johnny Juice. I just thought that like all DJs aspired to be as good as them. And Dr. Butcher was like, nah, man, no, you got to find yourself in these techniques and make it so that you're personalizing what they do, and what you see them or hear them flip. You want to learn, but then build on it and add your personality to it. And like a whole other paradigm shift took place for me when I met up with Dr. Butcher that one day. And that literally that night at his house, and I thank my boy Juju from the Beat Nuts, man, for introducing me to him and taking me to his house. I told him, yo, man, I want to train. I want to get in next year's DMC. He was like, all right, we'll start. The next time you come back, we'll start training. And sure enough, the next time was the next day. I was at his house, and he trained me like a monk would train a student in Shaolin. Like he was like, we were on it for like about 8 months. Every day we trained, and I entered my first battle, and that's how my legacy started.
It's crazy to think about those early days in hip hop. You know, I talked to Johnny Juice a little bit about it. It's crazy to think how overshadowed the DJs get back then, because most people focus on like the KRS ones, you know, the battling of the boroughs and stuff like that. And yeah, the DJs get brought up every now and then, especially the radio personalities. But there was so much behind the scenes, like you're saying, with the DJs, you know, fighting to get up and get going, you know, and it's like, it's so great to hear that, you know, and for people to hear that, because it's so underrated, like I said. Speaking of which, you were talking about your brother earlier, you know, with rapping. Now, is that ever anything that you tried, or you were just like, nope, can't do it, I'm just going to
no, I did all the elements. I b-boyed, I wrote graffiti, I wrote rhymes in class, and then would say them in the lunchroom. and I DJ'd. The element that I was best at was DJing, so I stuck with that. But growing up as a kid in the early 80s, you immersed yourself in hip hop culture. You didn't just pick one thing and decide, okay, this is what I want to be, and that's it. No, you did everything. You just were hip hop. You did everything. So, and not just me. I'm Grandmaster Kaz from the Cold Crush Brothers. He started off as a DJ Casanova. You know, Johnny Juice was a b-boy at first. Yeah. You know, like you did everything as a person immersed in hip hop culture. You experimented with all the elements, and then naturally there were elements that you were really good at, and then there were elements that you were maybe not as good at. So you kind of focused on what you were good at. But I tried it all, man. And to this day, like, you know, I'll freestyle just to myself for help's sake. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm gonna get you in the studio. Don't worry.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a dope MC. Like I'm best at DJing, but I tried it all. And to me, the elements are just a way of expressing yourself, you know? So right. I'm best at expressing myself through DJing, but self-expression is the ultimate goal, whether you're MCing, DJing, writing graffiti, or breakdancing.
Well, and I feel like that gives you a strength as a DJ in general anyways, because you have, you know, the ability to access those different things, you know, like you understand what rappers are doing, you understand what b-boys are doing, you know, and what exactly how those elements come together. Now, when you're talking about going to the peak as a DJ, I mean, heading right to the DMC battles, that's up there, you know. So how long did it take you in those battles? I mean, you didn't win, you won like shortly after you got going with it, right? It was just like within a few years, right?
So my first battle was in March of 1991 after training with Dr. Butcher for about 8 months. And I placed third in that competition. And then the following year, I entered the same battle and won. But in between that, I had a lot of failures and setbacks. You know, there were many battles throughout that year that I entered. It took me a full year to realize my goal and win. And I think the moral of the story there is people might fixate on, wow, it took them a year to win a competition, but don't get it twisted. Within that year, I entered multiple battles that I lost, you know? So it's important for people to realize that my career and the career of other master DJs revolved around a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, sticking with it, not being discouraged because an obstacle is in your way or because you're in a competition, you know you won, you know you beat this opponent of yours, and the judges just didn't see it that way. Staying with it, man, and not giving up on yourself. You know, when you do those things, you do realize your goals.
Right. A lot of patience. Now, I
Right.
mean, and obviously that led to great things for you. I mean, most supporters, I mean, you had a lot of supporters from the early days, but a lot of them came from when you know, teamed up with the Executioners. So how did that happen? Did you guys know each other prior and you just ran into each other, or like how'd that all work out?
So after training with Dr. Butcher for 8 months, we entered the DMC in March of 1991. I say we because I feel like he had so much to do with how well I executed my routine. He was there with me every step of the way during the training period. And so I placed third, and in some ways he placed third with me because he helped me, you know? So I think placing third, coming out of nowhere, no one knew who I was, made an impression on other DJs that were in the competition. And one of those DJs was Steve D,
Hmm.
co-founder of the X-Men. He was in the 1991 DMC as well, and he was the DJ that happened to win that year. I placed third, but I think that when I usually tell this story, sometimes I don't because it's kind of funny and a bit embarrassing, but I'll say it here. I wanted my goal because in my head I thought, man, who's beating Steve D in this battle? I'm just trying to get that second place because first and second place in the 1991 DMC were being flown to Chicago to battle in the American finals. So my goal was to place second right under Steve D and get to go to the American finals. That was my ultimate goal for that year. But I placed third. And personally, I feel like I should have placed second. Another guy named DJ Supreme, who I love and I'm super cool with. He actually did a masterclass video for my Brolic Army DJ school. But anyway, Supreme placed second. And I remember I walked on stage to get my third place prizes and I grabbed them from the host of the battle and then threw them into the crowd because that was my way of saying it's not about the prizes, man. I wanted second place. And I, stormed off the stage and I started bawling, crying, my eyes out because I wanted to win or not win, but place second. For me, that was the equivalent of winning. So my mentor, Dr. Butcher, went over to Steve and was like, dude, my guy's like just bent out of shape. He's sad. He wanted to play second. He didn't. Yo, will you please talk to him? Because I don't think he's going to listen to me. So Steve D went up to me and was consoling me like, yo, it's all good, man. You did great. Here's my number. Call me, dude. We'll talk. We'll vibe. I'll invite you and Drew, Dr. Butcher, over to Harlem and you'll practice with us. I guess that was his way of making me feel better about not winning. And sure enough, called him the next day. We started talking and he was like, yo, man, I want you guys to come out to Harlem and practice with me and my guys. So we, Dr. Butcher and I went to Harlem, practiced with him. And within a few minutes, Steve, Raider, Johnny Cash, they were like, yo, we want to know if you want to be in the X-Men. And I was just like, what? This is incredible. Like I looked up to Steve D and just the idea that I made an impression on him that inspired him and the rest of the guys to want to induct me and Dr. Butcher into the group, that for me was like winning the battle. So that's how I met the X-Men / Executioners.
Well, and that goes to show like the determination factor. You're saying,
Mhm.
like, yeah, you got upset. Yeah, but it all came from you being determined to get that second place spot.
Right.
And it's
Right.
just kind of funny how the world turns, because to get that second place spot, you got upset, and then all of a sudden you're in the X-Men. You know what?
Right. And I think that if I would have won, let's say, if I wouldn't have got second, right? Let's say I would have, let's correct that. Let's say I would have gotten second, or maybe I would have then gotten big headed, and made a negative impression on Stevie. Like I guess what I'm trying to say in a mangled way is that things happened exactly like they were supposed to, because I wouldn't change anything, man. And I'm glad that I didn't win, because it also inspired me to practice harder and develop better routines. So when I came back the next year and entered that same battle, I won. You know what I mean? Because sometimes losing is what you need to push you in the direction that you should be going in. And winning can make you weak. Winning can make you weak. You could win a battle and then think, I'm the ish. I don't need to practice as hard anymore. Losing is like, nah, fuck that. Like, they were wrong about me. Like, I'm gonna show them. And you just have this chip on your shoulder, and that chip just makes you want to like prove everyone wrong, and you practice harder and you get more creative. And I feel like that's what happened with me.
Well, and it does make you wonder, obviously your career with the Executioners was awesome, for anybody that knows the Executioners knows that. But what group would you have ended up in if you got in first place?
Yeah.
No,
who knows?
I'm just kidding.
Who knows? Maybe they still would have put me down. Maybe they would have been like, yo, this guy won. He's really dope. Let's put him in the crew. Who knows?
Right.
But
yeah,
I wouldn't change a thing.
Do you find yourself now as a performer? Because I've seen you perform publicly a few times. You don't ever seem anxious. You never seem nervous. You seem like you're right to the point, going, boom, you got it down, just like, most great performers. But do you find yourself nowadays, despite the pandemic, do you find yourself nowadays more anxious to perform and travel than you used to when you were younger? Or is it about the same or less?
That's a good question. I think missing out on performing and interacting with people live has made me appreciate all those days, all those tours, all those venues, those hotels that I grew tired of. You know what I mean? Sometimes as a entertainer, having to leave your house for an extended period of time, sleeping in different hotels, that can wear on you. But that was taken away from us for an entire year, and it does make you appreciate it more. So I do have this urge, this craving to get back out on the road. And I have done I've done 2 shows since the lockdown pretty much ended here for us in New York City. And it was great, man. It felt good to get back in front of people. Hopefully things will come back better for entertainers and DJs like myself, and we'll get back out on the road and be flying everywhere, man. Because it's one thing to stream and do a DJ set from home, and it's comfortable. You could be in your socks and just chill out. You know what I mean? You're done. You close your laptop and then sit on the couch.
Right.
Like, it's comfortable, but having that real-time feedback, there's nothing like it. You can't replicate that via a stream.
Well, it's even easier if you're a press play DJ, so.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If you're one of those DJs that just presses sync.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, man, it's just being in front of people and DJing and showing yourself in an organic way live is something that you can't really put in the same venue of a stream, for example, so
right.
I miss it. I definitely miss it. And I'm excited to continue to do more shows as the year unfolds and getting back to normal.
Oh yeah, because I mean the pandemic for me made me a lot more anxious, because of
Right.
that, being away
Yeah.
and everything.
Mm.
But yeah, hopefully the normalcy kind of switches it back and everything goes back. Because one of the great things I saw that you did within the past few years, I'm not sure if it'll still go on, but was the Queen's Comfort gig you did with the real DMT, which if nobody knows who he is, he's one of the most talented rappers I've ever seen, lyricist wise, and he's actually featured on my song "Closed Doors." So
For
check that
sure.
out. You could find him on YouTube as well in videos with DJ Rob Swift. But yeah, so the Queen's Comfort gig, do you feel like that's going to come back anytime soon, or is that kind of undecided?
Queen's Comfort is no more, and COVID basically
Shut it down.
is responsible for that. Yeah. So a lot of businesses, man, during the lockdown just didn't survive, and Queen's Comfort was one of them.
I mean,
But it's
they had
good.
lines freaking 2 blocks.
Yeah, 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 exactly. That said, it's always forward for me.
Right.
And I'm not one to like really, although, if I get asked a question about the past and my, earlier formative years of DJing, I'll answer it. But I'm always looking towards the future and what's next. So I had a lot of fun doing that Queen's Comfort residency and jamming with James Avatar and the real DMT. Lex Rush,
Oh
MC
yeah.
would come and hang out with us
Yep.
sometimes. It was fun, but you also you don't want to be stagnant doing the
Right.
same thing. You know what I mean? So I'm just excited for the future and what's to come right now.
Right. No, 100%. And we're going to get
Hmm.
into that. One thing that you have going on right now is the Brolic Army School. Now, this is kind of interesting for me because it's something I've kind of brought up on previous episodes. But one thing that's been big in my life within the past few years is, leaving a legacy. If you're somebody that has so much knowledge to offer, why aren't like what are you doing to share it with other people? Because a lot of people are still selfish nowadays and they're not telling anybody anything they know and they're just like rolling with it. But this is like fascinating to me because it's like I met you through Scratch DJ Academy, so and obviously you're offering an education now that's more seems to be one-on-one, more direct, and you're featuring different special guests that people probably aren't expecting firsthand. So before we get into specifics, what sparked the idea to get this going?
Well, I've been teaching the art of DJing on different platforms, whether it's vocational DJ schools, universities, workshops for now going on 20 years. And I guess what inspired me to launch the Brolic Army movement was the frustration that I felt with regards to not really having my own proper platform to teach. I feel like when you are the boss, so to speak, of the content that you're putting out, you have free reign to disseminate the information however you want. But if you're being hired by a platform separate from you to teach, you have to work within the parameters of that platform. And so I feel like having my own online DJ school is allowing me to teach this art the way I learned it, opposed to fitting in a box and having limitations. Now I'm free to talk about whatever I want to talk about. I just want people to learn the way I did in a very organic way. So my lessons, before you learn one technique, I explain the history and the origins of that technique. And I feel that's something that a lot of the platforms that I worked for in the past didn't do, you know? And thinking back to how I started, I'm just grateful that I came up in the era that I did because I feel this art form was passed on to me directly from the pioneers. Whereas a lot of people that teach now learned it from watching YouTube. So they got the techniques, but on YouTube, you're not learning about the history of the techniques. They're just teaching you the steps involved in executing a flare, in executing a beat juggle move. But I know where those flare scratches evolve from. I know where those beat juggle movements evolve from because I came up as a little kid studying the pioneers of this art form. So I'm bringing that to the table with regards to the Brolic Army DJ School. And I'm just super grateful, man, and excited. It's been super successful. I've launched it now. It's been 6 months. And with each day, the school grows and my reach grows with that. So it's like on, man. I get to champion this art form and expose it to more people now. And I'm doing it on my own platform. So I'm super grateful for that.
And it feels like it's an endless opportunity as well, because I mean, like you said, you're teaching things that aren't taught at many places. You know, I could definitely vouch for that. You know, at the certain places that I learned at, I didn't really learn too much about the history. I had to watch documentaries. I had to go on and look at that. And one thing that irritates me as another DJ today is how it's so easy for these DJs nowadays just to go on and boom, just look. In a way, it's like it's great for them because they'll learn a lot quicker on certain things, but they do miss out on the fundamentals and the history behind it. And when I say learn quicker, it doesn't mean it's going to stick, you know, because you're teaching in a way that's authentic and like it's going to register a lot easier, I guess you could say.
Context is everything, especially when you're learning a discipline. You got to have context on what you're learning. Who did what, when, why, where, how, so that you're equipped with the knowledge to then be creative as well. And if you're learning how to DJ, for example, from someone that doesn't provide the context, you're just a robot. You're just being programmed to do the things that are being shown in that YouTube tutorial. So you're being programmed to move a certain way, to use certain sounds, and there's no creativity in that. Creativity comes when you establish an emotional connection to what you're doing. And that can't happen if you don't have context. So that's why in my tutorials at Brolic Army DJ School, I pride myself on providing detail and backstories and history to everything that I'm teaching, so that subconsciously, when you go to practice, you're wanting to add on to the text, to the scripture of what this DJing shit is about, opposed to just taking and then monetizing it. Oh yeah, I learned this new way of mixing, so now I'm going to DJ at the club and make money. Like, that's not what this art is about, man.
Right.
This art is about expression. It's about building on what the DJs before you contributed, you know. And I feel like DJing now is so popular and so easy to do. You could order the equipment and it'll come to you within a week, and voila, you're a DJ. When I was coming up, you had to save money, and buying the equipment was a process that took months.
Nowadays, people are like numb to the bad DJs out there, because you're probably the same. I could walk into a club nowadays and be like, okay, that's a press play DJ, or that, you know, or that's a great DJ. You could feel it, you know, if they're doing it for the expression, like what you're saying, or that's in them, you know, or they're just sitting here, boom, boom, blending that, you know. And a lot of people nowadays have become numb to that element because that's all that's going on the radio. That's all that's going on around, you know, in the mainstream right now. So this is what people do need to understand, you know, like what you're saying, you know, it's an expression, it's a feeling more than it is the action.
Right. Totally. It's about you connecting with your higher self, the part of you that creates, not connecting with money or connecting with social media currency, fame, likes. You know, like, I feel as though DJing for a lot of people has become a way of just having clout. And so at Brolic Army DJ School, if you're going to learn there, you have to be ready to soak in and digest the history of this art form, not just the techniques.
And there's a weird wave coming, like, I mean, there's vinyl keeps popping up, as like in phase, out of phase. Like Canada had, cassettes in for distribution recently for certain artists to release on, so the fact that vinyl's coming back and you're seeing more DJs, a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, you can learn the easy way and DJ for, I don't know, let's hit a club for $1,000 tonight, something like that. But you're going to end up making more money learning the right way, because you're going to give it a better delivery and you're going to be more passionate about it than you will be if you're just, hit and play. You're going to get bored of that after a while. So,
and it's also about having longevity. You want longevity in this art form, man. You want to be able to do it for a long period of time. And that longevity comes with experience and appreciation and respect for what you're doing.
And all that is provided to you by the Brolic Army DJ School. You can find more information at www.brolicarmydjschool.com. And you could also find out more information on Rob Swift at djrobswift.com. Now, I took a peek myself at the school and everything. It's affordable. Like, nobody's going to struggle. Like, you could literally, if you have an extreme passion to DJ, like right now, if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, you could literally sign up right now, no matter what your job is, what you do, and you're going to be able to afford this school. Like, it's a good price and it's worth it, and it's actually, because all the packages are, they vary, so there's definitely something for you in the school. Anything else you want to share before we close out? Or
I just want to say that I'm thankful to God for getting me this far as a DJ, not to get all spiritual or religious or anything like that, man. But I do feel that it wasn't just me being talented or skilled. I feel like there are a lot of skilled, talented DJs that the world doesn't even know about, and I feel like I owe a lot to not just the people that, whether it was my brother or my dad or my mentor, the people that taught me about DJing and influenced me to connect with it the way I do, with such passion. I also owe a lot to whatever the force is, if you call it God, the universe, whatever that force is, man. Like, throughout my career, I've had ups, I've had downs, and somehow I came out of it, on standing and still championing DJ art. I came up with guys that today you don't even know what they're doing. They're not even DJing anymore. And back in the day when we battled, they were like the ish. So I don't know. I guess I just want to say that, like, I feel my connection to that force that inspires me to be creative on the turntables is that same force that made it possible for me to have this DJ school, man. And I'm just super thankful and grateful. And I'm glad we got to build, man. You and I go way back, and there was like a student teacher mentor sort of relationship that I had with you, Mazeman. And I'm proud of you too, man. It's dope to see you do this podcast and continuing on and discovering yourself and where you fit into this whole, creative world that we live in. Is this so?
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And I'm just waiting. Obviously, I'm gonna scope out the Brolic Army DJ School more, but I'm also waiting to see a real DMT course pop up for some lyricist rapping.
Yeah, we need something like that. Yeah,
I gotta learn some of those rhymes he's writing.
Right on, man.
But yeah, man. No, congratulations to you too. I can't wait to hear more. Like I said, go check out Brolic Army DJ School. You can find it on social media. You could also find it on brolicarmydjschool.com. Find Rob Swift, Brolic Arm on Instagram, and djrobswift.com. Thanks for coming on, man.
Right on, bro.
Now, don't forget to go check out the Brolic Army DJ School. I mean, he's living proof that you should learn the fundamentals rather than easy tutorials on YouTube. I mean, doing a school like Brolic Army DJ School, you're taking advantage of learning from one of the best turntablists on the planet. So why wouldn't you do it for such an affordable price? I mean, I don't have to sell it anymore. I feel like we did a great job telling you about it, but it's definitely something I'm going to look into eventually to sharpen up my skills a little bit, because it's, turntables aren't really my primary thing anymore, but I got to get back into it a little bit for when I start going back out and performing live. But that was dope to have DJ Rob Swift on. Now let's get into a release feast.
Release feast.
The first release I want to get into is called What's Life by YBN Cordae and Common. I believe he had a solo version of this released a while back, but this one's featuring Common. Not much to say about it. I believe it was on something to do with the soundtrack for Spider-Man. I know I should be more factual with this, but Common, came in with Common style, very lyrical, worth a listen. You got to check it out. It's called What's Life by YBN Cordae and Common. The second one I want to bring up is called Tokyo Nights by Logic featuring Like. It was recorded back during his Doc D sessions, and it has typical Logic feel, but very lyrical. The flow was very catchy. Check it out. And the final song that I picked out to share with you guys is Hurt Like Me by Saint Bodhi, or Saint Bodhi, however she pronounces it, but it's Bodhi. You have to check it out. Very poetic, very heartfelt. It's an R&B track, but it has hip hop elements, with the message that she's trying to send, very angry, and like revengeful. And I dug the hip hop elements involved with it. Definitely worth a shot. A little bit different than what I typically listen to, but it's there, and I'm going to continue to listen to her moving forward. Don't forget to follow my new group, Real East Duo, on all social media platforms. And don't forget to go check out Brolic Army DJ School and more on DJ Rob Swift. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the support. Until next episode.
That's right. Yeah.